The Indian diaspora in the UK will stage a protest outside the BBC headquarters in London to raise awareness about the nefarious anti-India reportage in its documentary on Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. BBC's two-part documentary on the Indian Prime Minister titled India, the Modi Question has been banned in India. Last week, the Indian Ministry of Information and Broadcasting directed YouTube and Twitter to take down the links sharing the docu-series. This comes as Islamist extremists in Leicester have issued threats to Indians residing in the areas. Remember, viewers, Leicester has a history of violence against Hindus. The Hindu Forum of Britain, which is the HFB, has also stated that it is disappointed with the BBC's anti-Hindu bias, adding that the country's national broadcaster lacked judgment in airing the program. The BBC has now put the lives of Indians at risk with its propaganda documentary, which focuses only on religiously polarizing issues concerning Prime Minister Modi's governance and has completely obliterated what really matters and where India is today. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, former diplomat, with me on the program. Pandit Satish K. Sharma, director of the Global Hindu Federation, joined us all the way from London. Professor Kishan Devani, UK politician, is also with us on this special program. Mr. Kuldeep Singh Shekhawat, President Overseas Front of the BJP, he's also joining us from the United Kingdom. And Akshat Jagmohan, current affairs commentator, is joining us live from Leicester as well. Ambassador Mukherjee, I'd like to begin with you. The BBC has nothing better to do. They have targeted India at a time when we are at a zenith, an apex of accomplishment as well as world recognition. This is definitely motivated. This is definitely nefarious, like I mentioned in my opening monologue. But the people who can really help out in teaching the BBC a lesson are doing exactly that in the UK, the Indian diaspora.
But absolutely, Vineet, I would modify your statement to say that they have nothing better to do except to ensure that Hindu phobia is the key word in the politics of the United Kingdom, that they're doing everything to malign India, to malign our Prime Minister, and to make the governance of UK by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak more difficult, to ensure that there will be no FTA between India and the United Kingdom, and by showing such rank disrespect for India, a former colony that they impoverished, that they brought repeated famines on, that they divided us, they partitioned us, they left us bleeding with 21% literacy rate. And today we are, as you rightly say, we are presiding over the G20. This shows what? That the BBC does not understand that the sun has definitely set on the British Empire, that the BBC does not understand that the United Kingdom itself may break up after Brexit, that there have been independence referendums in Scotland, that Northern Ireland has said that unless the Good Friday Agreement is respected, that they will have to think twice about their ties with the UK, etc. It's time to set their own house in order. And on our side, Vineet, we have actually not banned this documentary. In my perspective, we should now fully ban this documentary, because this documentary, like Mein Kampf, is actually spreading hatred towards Indians and Hindus and the legally, democratically elected Prime Minister of India. We cannot afford to let such a documentary be seen and heard. So, if the BBC doesn't understand what damage they are doing to a relationship which otherwise had gone far beyond the colonial divide, I feel sorry for them. It's time for leadership change in BBC. It's a wake-up call to the British government. And unless they work fast, I could tell them on behalf of viewers here in India that India is outraged by the behavior of the BBC. And I'm so proud of our diaspora that they are taking it upon themselves, because this diaspora contributes to the prosperity of the United Kingdom. This is a diaspora which has shown its mettle. And today this diaspora will demonstrate in United Kingdom that they cannot denigrate India and Hindus in this manner and get away with it. We have moved far beyond 1947. Vineet.
Absolutely. Well stated, ma'am. Pandit Satish Sharma, if you can hear me, sir.
Yes, I can. Jai
Well,
Shri Ram.
well,
Namaskar.
can it be said that the BBC is trying to justify its own redundancy in times where India is perhaps leading a number of forums and platforms across the world? You know, in their quest for ratings, they have stooped so low as to, find problems with a country which has gone against all our odds to get to where it is today. And that place is above where the UK stands today economically.
Gee, I think we make a mistake in thinking of the BBC as merely a broadcaster anymore. You know, if you
It's
have
a
a look at
political
its
party.
history, completely, it is a political party. It is an agent of a particular type of ideology. You know, since 1970, I think it was when the BBC was first banned by Indira Gandhi. And then I think in 75, 41 Congress MPs also wrote objecting to the BBC's broadcasting, saying that the BBC never misses an opportunity to malign India. There is a track record that we have to take into account. And it's a tragedy because here in the United Kingdom, the British Hindu community, remember, we have 0% in prisons. We are a wonderful community who contribute in every way, shape or form. We are beyond reproach. And yet the BBC still seeks to create division, still seeks to incite hatred. And if you look at the colonialist attitude of Jack Straw, you know, this is an old, tired strategy of making brown people fight amongst themselves. That is so evident in his demeanor. It's so evident in the actions that are now being disclosed. So I think the government of India has actually been overly gentle. We shouldn't be thinking of banning the broadcast or whatever. We should actually be completely withdrawing the BBC's right to broadcast and participate in the Bharatiya nation itself. It has nothing good to offer India anymore. And if anything, it needs to be in India far more than India needs the BBC. So I would encourage the government to step forward and actually ban the BBC for a period of time. This is not an agency which wants tranquility, success, prosperity in Bharat. This is an agency which is inciting intercommunal violence, and it's doing it knowingly and deliberately.
Right, absolutely. And Akshat, if you're there with us?
Yes, hi.
Akshat, and let us also not forget that BBC is that same channel or that same broadcasting organization which stooped down to levels towards its own royal family to get out facts and malign facts which actually did not exist about the people, about their own people. Forget about how they talk about India, but a company which has not been kind, has not been ethical when it comes to its own reportage at home, cannot be trusted to make sense or talk about the truth when it comes to any other country, let it be India.
Yeah, see, many of us who've grown on a staple diet of the BBC, The Economist, The Guardian, including me, I feel like a bit of a fool now because, it's something which I've read for almost, 20, 25 years. And, what came on the BBC was considered to be the gospel truth. Now, obviously, recent events, I mean, this isn't something which has just happened recently, even over the sort of last 10 years, when you've been monitoring the kind of reportage that goes on the BBC, especially with regards to India, you can see that there is a complete disconnect between what is happening on the ground and what the BBC actually reports. The sad truth is the BBC still operates almost like a colonial entity. I think our previous speaker, Pandit Sharma, was saying that, it has this policy of divide and rule even today, which is kind of strange because the BBC is seen as the voice piece of the global left, but that colonial attitude of divide and rule still exists. And I, for one, feel like a member of the colonial public. When every time I pay my TV license fee, I feel like I'm paying for my own oppression. So I think the BBC is not going to change. So I think what we need to be looking at from an Indian perspective is what can we do to try and tackle the falsehoods that are being spread by the BBC. Now, whether a ban is required or not, I don't know, because now people have sort of jumped onto that bandwagon saying that, oh, look, this is exactly what we're saying, that media freedom is dead in India. But, some sort of action does need to be taken. I personally think that a point-by-point rebuttal would have been good. I think it would have also been, probably fair for us to show that BBC should have shown a multitude of views that exist in India, which didn't happen. If you look at a lot of the journalists who were interviewed, yes, they did interview Shwapan Dasgupta as well, but Shwapan Dasgupta was interviewed for about an hour, and I think it was like barely, a couple of minutes of what he said that was put on the documentary. So I don't think a multitude of views were taken into account, and I think that is something which we do need to raise strongly amongst the Indian diaspora.
Okay, Professor Kishan Devani also joins me at this point in time. Professor Kishan, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
What are your thoughts on this doctored documentary that the BBC has put out? What gives them the right to come up with, such reportage 20 years first up after this incident, and secondly, at a time when India is perhaps trumping the United Kingdom in every department possible? Why haven't they made something similar about what's going on in China? Why haven't they made something similar about what's going on in Pakistan? Why haven't they made something similar on what's going on in South America?
It's absolutely fascinating, given the situation, the political situation we find ourselves in our country as well. And it shows you really the hypocrisy. And I mentioned this last time when I was on your show about how hypocrisy plays a big part in this. And actually, this entire documentary, if you examine it, the people that were called on to give evidence or to give their opinions, etc., had a completely biased view, a one-sided view that was very evident. And I just caught the back end of what Akshat was saying a moment ago. But what's fascinating is this entire narrative that has been created, and it feels like as if, and I wouldn't want to talk on the BBC's behalf, but it really feels like as if they're following an agenda that may not be seen, in terms of on face value. You may not know who's behind this agenda, but really there's a huge sense of hypocrisy. And if you look at, for example, I believe that the gentleman that I was here talking about last time around was also mentioned in that video. But actually, and I'll go back to what I said on the last time I was on your show. Prime Minister Modi was up for election. His party was up for election about a month or two ago in Gujarat, in the state of which this documentary was mentioned. That has a very large Muslim population living in it. They were up at the ballot box and they won their best result in history. In history, I want to mark this, right? The reality is this: I go to Gujarat. It's my ancestral home. It's where my great-grandparents and grandparents were born. It's where my wife's family are from. And I have spoken to Muslims living in Gujarat. And the reality is something totally different to what this documentary is talking about right now. It is bonkers, quite frankly. I use this term because it's absurd. They are peddling a narrative, which is, without me saying too much, it may be an agenda by various other people. But actually, it's hypocrisy, because Britain right now is on its knees trying to beg for a trade deal, which was going to happen anyway. We knew this. Politically, Britain is on its knees trying to beg for a trade deal from India because they're so weak after leaving the European Union, and the Conservative Party has decimated this country. But the reality is this, is that, are we trying to be serious when we come to relationships with India? Are we trying to be serious when we're dealing with ambassadors and high commissioners in this country? We're not. And I think that this is a whole hypocrisy from not just from the BBC. I think it's through the system, and that people like myself speak out about it and actually want to talk the truth. And we do have people like yourselves and NewsX that want to relay this information. But look, I think we have to deal with this. We have to not just protest, because anyone can protest, but actually rebut these points. Systematically go through these intellectually. Go through these with facts and figures and evidence. And I think the reality is we have had evidence that the BJP were tested at the ballot box recently in the same state. And if there was really an issue, if there was really this resentment, this factual evidence that they keep talking about, then why did they get delivered the largest majority in history a moment ago, just 6 weeks ago? So I think we've got real issues here that we need to grapple with, but it has to be challenged by evidence and by facts.
Let me also rope in Mr. Kuldeep Singh Shekhawat onto this conversation. Mr. Shekhawat, if you can hear me, sir. Mr. Shekhawat?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Right. Well, Kishan does have a point that, there's no point getting emotional about this. This has to be rebutted. This has to be dismissed. This has to be ostracized and done away with on the basis of intellectual evidence, which there is none with the BBC, because whatever they are talking about is, of course, fabricated, it's doctored, it's been constructed, it's come up actually, in an editing studio.
Yeah. We need the very, very basic of this documentary is fake. See, Professor Devani has very clearly said that if there was an electoral issue, there were sentiments against BJP, against Prime Minister Modi, then it would have come out in the recent elections. And before that, we are talking about 2002 to 2023. There had been numerous elections of assembly elections, and all of them BJP has won in states. That clearly shows that BJP had no issue, Prime Minister Modi had no issue against him in Gujarat. Who is BBC? They are just trying to be a monitor in the class and trying to run the class the way they want to run it. It's
Self-appointed monitor. Self-appointed monitor.
Yes, they are. They seem to be doing that. On second thought, there is an issue which is a leftist issue, but I think they cannot digest this fact that FTA is being done between India and United Kingdom. So something should be done. So there is an agenda at the back to destroy India-UK relations at this hour with Conservative Party. Whereas we know that we have an Indian origin Prime Minister in UK, and that Prime Minister is trying to mend his ways. He is trying to deal with India. He is trying to make sure that things go in the right direction. But yes, BBC being BBC, they are trying to be rough, tough, and what you call them as leftists, who really want to behave in a very rowdy way. BBC's entire sentiment that has come out in United Kingdom against BBC, entire Indian population, the Indian origin population here is against BBC now, and we will show them a method, way and direction that okay, if you want to mess around with Indian community, we will reply. We are not waiting for Indian government to act, we will act ourselves. And we are ready for that action, and you will see how it goes in coming days. Things are really moving, with every Indian speaking to us saying this is not right. The way they have projected Prime Minister Modi is absolutely absurd, and it's completely biased. How can you have a view of only one-sided public? You cannot run a documentary like that. There are complaints, over 1,000 complaints have already gone to Ofcom. More people are writing to Ofcom, and let's see what happens in coming days. But yes, honestly speaking, BBC has trouble at their end.
Okay, Ambassador Mukherjee, we've already responded to this. The ministry has also, in fact, furiously condemned what this particular organization has done. But I'm very sure they're not going to stop at this. What do we do, if something like this continues?
First of all, Vineet, I wanted to tell some of my co-panelists who've joined us from UK that, in fact, public figures, including myself, have brought out a rebuttal point by point, because I quite agree with those who said it needs a point by point rebuttal, and I also agree that there is no place for emotion in this matter, because this is an attempt to denigrate the Republic of India, its democratic institutions, its Prime Minister, and to show a heavy colonial hand on India so many years after independence. So there's no place for emotion, and I certainly am not emotional when I deal with BBC or with such racist Brits. I would like to congratulate the Indian diaspora there and to assure them that as they take on the BBC in UK, we will on our side here in India take on their racist propaganda, and we will find ways and means to ensure that they cannot destroy an entire bilateral relationship. The FTA is very close to being finalized, Vineet, and to me, as a professional diplomat, it's very clear that there are vested interests in domestic politics in the United Kingdom who do not want the glory of an India-EU FTA to be taken by an Indian origin Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. It's as clear as that. It's a very dirty game that is being played, which is why I agree with our Indian Minister of Commerce when he said that an FTA is negotiated with regard to trade and commerce, and it should not be confused with other extraneous issues. He was trolled on Twitter for that by Indians who were furious because he was trying to de-link it from the BBC documentary. And because he was trolled, it shows how much the BBC has succeeded in vitiating the atmosphere here in India and in making it difficult for Rishi Sunak actually as Prime Minister to go further than what he did in the House of Commons when he told that gentleman who asked that question when he gave a very diplomatic answer. There were those who said maybe he should have gone further, but I felt, Vineet, that he couldn't have gone any further because he is in a difficult situation being the Prime Minister of UK. He's not Prime Minister of India. So we will take this forward. There is no place for emotion. There is only place for rebuttal, cold, factual rebuttal. But yes, we must ban this documentary, and I am not in favor of banning the BBC for the plain and simple reason that it would then give India's detractors the opportunity to say, then what's the difference between democratic India and China? What's the difference between Modi and Xi Jinping? What's the difference? How can India say that there are media freedoms in India? So why should we do that? We should keep the BBC here and keep them under control. Can we say that a nation of 1.2 billion people cannot keep this petty little British Broadcasting Corporation, which is the epitome of British racism of the Labour Party? We cannot keep them under control. Of course, we can keep it under control.
Absolutely.
We will keep them here and we will keep them under control.
All right. Absolutely, ma'am. We've run out of time. Kishan, I saw your hand go up. It's important to understand that if the UK Prime Minister has also come up specifically and talked about why this is not the accurate description and depiction of what happened, there is something for the BBC to go back and work out on the drawing board.
Yeah, well, I think what Ambassador Mukherjee said a moment ago is fascinating because I'm glad to hear that she's doing a point rebuttal, but also actually it raises the larger point that Prime Minister Sunak has been many ways been planted in a situation where he cannot come out victorious, both domestically and internationally. And that is a very strategic thing being done by the current government. And it will unfortunately tarnish the fact that he comes from our background, from an Indian background, and it's quite strategic what they're doing and what they've done, and it will continue to happen. Unfortunately, it'll probably, unfortunate or fortunate, that's a completely different debate, and depending on which political spectrum you're on. But the reality is that it'll probably lead to the demise of the Conservative Party and them losing a general election as well. So this will be what will be happening next time, and it's a larger picture. I think the ambassador has been very subtly pointing at this. I don't really want to say much more, but it's been a pleasure to join your panel today.
Okay, Pandit Sharma, any concluding thoughts that you'd like to share with us before we end this program?
Gee, we leap to produce rebuttals, and that's a good thing. We're getting very good at it. But the rebuttal already exists. It's in the Supreme Court. It's a Supreme Court judgment.
Well said.
It defines exactly what happened. The BBC should be required to respond to the facts as contained in the Supreme Court. And if they cannot disprove the evidence that was presented in the Supreme Court, they should withdraw this documentary and apologize. It's clearly fake.
All right. Wonderful. Akshat, any thoughts before we end?
Yeah, just 4 very small points. One of the things which I just wanted to draw the attention of your viewers to is that this documentary came just, I think, a few days after Modi actually reached out to the Muslims of India, telling his party that, you need to represent all Muslims, irrespective of whether they vote for you or not, especially the Pasmandas. So it's just a bit interesting to note that this has happened straight after that. Secondly, despite how much effort the BBC puts into actually trying to interfere in the internal affairs of India, I don't think it's going to have a major impact, because how many people actually read or follow the BBC in India? I think the vernacular press in India, the Hindi language press, whether it's your Dainik Bhaskars, etc., they are a lot more powerful, and I don't think it's going to have any impact on the elections per se. The third thing is, as a representative, as the voice piece of the left in the UK, the BBC quite often actually promotes the views of the Labour Party. And if you look at most of the cases of anti-Semitism or Hinduphobia, which is coming out in UK politics, it's largely Labour representatives in the north who are pandering to the prejudices of their constituents. So that's one of the reasons probably why this documentary is not balanced as well. And finally, I'd just like to leave you with a question, which is that Hindus in India are in a majority. So even if there is a skewed narrative, there is a sort of counter narrative that comes up. But globally, they are a minority. So how are they going to fight back against the bias that exists? I think that'll be something for both Hindus in India and globally to ponder over.
All right, Mr. Shekhawat, quick closing thoughts, sir, and then we wrap up.
Precisely what is happening is a division is being created between the Hindus and Muslims of UK, first stop. And this division is being created maybe on the behest of Labour Party or the Pakistani supporters of Labour Party, because they don't want the Hindu community to unite, and they want to divide the Muslim community also, Hindu community also, and put together. What is being done in UK is, as Indians are more prone towards conservative right now, they think let Indians be taught a lesson, and there should be something which we should do to create a wedge. So that has been done. What BBC was able to do was this only, but anyway, it's not going to harm the community in any way. Community is strong, community will remain strong, and there will be absolutely excellent relations that will remain within the Indian community.
All right.
And we will fight back for whatever they have done.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. That is a crux, a synopsis of what we feel about this mock-up of a documentary that the BBC has put out.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.